Today's sermon, When Home Doesn't Feel Liberating, was written by Reverend Ellie Kirkpatrick. Or Kilpatrick, I didn't say that. So when the word is I, it is Ellie's words, not my words, just to let you know. Passover cedars are something I cherish, in part because they are joyous experiences and delicious food to be shared with loved ones. And you don't even have to get dressed up because they take place in your home. It's a time to enjoy family and share the Exodus story. We had a cedar every year growing up. Sometimes just the four of us, sometimes with grandparents and extended family, and sometimes with dear friends. But it was always sacred and fun. And yes, I feel like we water down some of the more disturbing elements for our cedars, but the story we share is one of liberation, one of coming home. And it's a harder message to connect with this year. Although it's awfully hard to know the days of the week right now, Passover begins Wednesday night. The seders all over the world will look very different than they usually do. There will be less food, less family, and if I'm being honest for me, less of a celebration. Because the message of coming home doesn't feel liberating right now. It feels stifling. Yes, home is hopefully a refuge from a pandemic, but home is also where I'm stuck. Home is where we are without our freedom, and for so many of us, without our loved ones. As you use our relationship with Passover may be a little fraught, but we do still have a relationship with this holiday. It's a journey story, after all. But how do we celebrate this journey story when we ourselves aren't able to journey? How do we celebrate home when home doesn't feel like something to celebrate? And then I remember that Passover celebrations have persisted in far more disturbing environments than this. Michael Cutts was a Holocaust survivor, and he wrote a memoir called If by Miracle. In it, he shares one of the Jews in our group, Moshe Abramowitz, who had escaped from the town of Broshvik, had brought with him a small prayer book that he kept hidden in his boots. He helped our group cope with the difficult conditions in the forest and the tragedy of our people. Reminding us that Passover was fast approaching, he managed to obtain some beets to make a red soup to substitute for wine traditionally used during the holiday ritual. We had no matzah, but he dug up some horseradish from the nearby field. On the night of the first Seder, we gathered near our underground bunker. As I was the youngest, it was decided that I would ask the 4 questions. From Ma Nishipana, I knew them well since, as the youngest in my family, I had always been the appropriate candidate. Here in the forest, I interpreted the answer to the question somewhat differently. In answer to the question, why is this night different from all other nights? I replied, because last Passover, all the Jews sat with their families at tables beautifully set with matzah and goblets of red wine. Last year, each of us had a goblet on our plate and listened to the oldest person in the household conduct the Seder. Tonight, in the forest, our lonely and orphan group, having miraculously survived, remembers our loved ones who were taken from us forever. Personally, my isolation feels quaint by comparison, though that may not be the case for some of you. And knowing that our Jewish siblings observe this holiday in the midst of the most appalling circumstances, that even some in concentration camps found ways to observe their faith, inspires me to see that some moments of home and liberation are for us to choose. That we can see this moment as just that, one moment in a longer path. That maybe home isn't an endpoint. Maybe home is the journey itself, where we make stops along the way, are held up in captivity, and have moments of liberation. Passover Seders, we live the Exodus because the journey home is ever present. And I think it actually teaches that it's not the home, but the journey that liberates us. The journey that our faith is a home. It's a home because we aren't ashamed to be who we are, to believe what we believe, and share our lives regardless of the world we find ourselves in. It's a home because we are still figuring out who we are. We're still looking for answers, and we know we have support in that endeavor. Because even when we are lost, even when we are boxed in, we know the spiritual journey continues. Because Unitarian Universalism teaches that revelation is ongoing, forever a work in progress. And so is home. A religious home of Unitarian Universalism doesn't see itself as an endpoint. So many people share that when they found Unitarian Universalism, they finally found their spiritual home. And I was no different. I had an instant feeling of home the moment I walked through the doors in my first UU church. But that feeling of home didn't mean I stopped seeking. It meant I could really begin. And that seeking is something we can do even when physically constrained, because that is the home we have built together. We might be in a moment of captivity right now, but the moments of liberation will come. I think about what Michael Cutts said. Oh, let me start over. I think about what Michael Cutts went through and the captivity that they were subjected to. Huddled in a bunker, they celebrated Passover not because they were in a place of comfort or a place of home. They celebrated because they weren't. And yet, out of their losses, they had created a family. They went through gratitude in the Seder, because the journey home was something they could still create out of their orphaned group. They were still journeying. And the collective journey would continue even when individuals were lost and mourned. I know that in the months to come, each of us are going to experience losses, moments of profound sorrow. But we have the ability to seek a collective liberation because we are a family of sorts. A family of isolated, Zoom-dependent Unitarian Universalists that still has the resources to care for one another from afar. And when the smoke clears, and we are once again free to leave our houses, we will be carrying our home with us because we are the home. And home is not an endpoint. It's a journey we continue to create and nurture. And the work we do to love each other through the trauma is our liberation. This is our saving story. That love will guide us to keep building our liberated home as the family we are. Blessed be and amen.